Each episode reveals a pivotal act of terrorism, the people behind it, the ideology that fueled it, and the networks that still operate today. Because terrorism doesn't only live in the history book. It survives in the movements, the propaganda, and the next generation of recruits. To understand the threat today, we have to listen to the echoes of the past. I am retired FBI Special Agent Laura Burns, Head of Terrorism Research at George Washington University's Program on Extremism. And this is Echoes of Terrorism.
How many shots did you hear?
More than 10, I can tell you.
More than 10? Okay, and did you hear anything after the gunshots?
No.
No?
As soon as I heard that, we ran.
I live in Tampa, Florida, and my daughter just called me to tell me that there has been a shooting at Pulse nightclub. I don't know if y'all have gotten a call on that.
Yes, we have. Is your daughter there?
My daughter is there. She said apparently she's been shot twice.
911, what's the location of emergency?
The shooting that's going on downtown,
Yes.
My ex-girlfriend is hiding in the bathroom at the club Pulse. She said there's people hiding in the bathroom there, she's in there, and there's dead people there. There's the Pulse nightclub, my girlfriend's in the bathroom. There are now 4 dead in the bathroom and 2 shot. They're bleeding now. If somebody doesn't get there soon, they're going to die.
Yes, my son was shot in the club in the Pulse in Orlando, and he's still in the bathroom when he's bleeding. He got shot, and nobody's going in for him.
On June 12th, 2016, a terrorist entered the Pulse nightclub in Orlando, Florida, and proceeded to shoot indiscriminately, repeatedly over and over among the crowd of partygoers, killing 49 and injuring many others. Today, we're here to talk about that terrible terrorist attack. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today for our episode on the Pulse nightclub terrorist attack. With us today, we are honored to have retired FBI Special Agent Ron Hopper. Ron Hopper is currently the undersheriff for the Seminole County Sheriff's Office and has been since August of 2021. That is when he retired from the FBI. He retired out as an FBI Assistant Special Agent in Charge in the Orlando, Florida area, and actually served with the FBI for over 23 years in various capacities. On the day of the Pulse nightclub attack, June 12th, 2016, he was in the role of FBI Assistant Special Agent in Charge. Thank you so much, Undersheriff, for joining us today to share and enlighten us about the events of that horrible day.
No, thanks for having me, Laura.
Well, why don't you take us back to June 12th, 2016, and what you were doing, earlier in the day, and then, kind of how events transpired that day. And then after that, we'll go back into what the investigation uncovered.
Yeah, so I'll give you a little bit of an anecdotal story that is very germane to this conversation, for lack of a better term. So I had I was just coming up on a year as the ASAC for Orlando. The week prior to the Pulse happening, I started getting emails basically telling me I had to go to the on-scene commander training out at SERG. And then if I didn't do it, by the end of the year, we were going to get dinged on inspection. Everybody that knows the FBI way of life, last thing you want to do is be the person that causes you to fail some aspect of the inspection. So, and it wasn't like I was trying to dodge the training. I had been on multiple SWAT teams before previously, both in the Bureau and with my prior experience as a deputy sheriff in Hernando County, and had been involved in several hostage situations and things like that. It just was the typical, my goodness, I can't be away for a week. I can't imagine what the emails are going to be like when I get back. I can't leave the desk, right? But you get that email that says you're going or else. So I found myself on a plane to on-scene commander training at CERC. And the timing was apropos. So one of the presentations that was done by Jill Sanborn, who was the ASAC when San Bernardino happened. And after sitting through that presentation, I just remember thinking to myself, my goodness, this is going to come for us in Orlando. So I literally stalked her out into the parking lot, having never met Jill before. And I said, hey, Jill, my name's Ron Hopper. You don't know me, but I'm the ASAC out in Orlando. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. This will come for us because we have some of the most iconic targets in our backyard. Disney, Universal, UCF, which at the time was fighting to be the largest university in the United States, Lockheed Martin, all these defense contractors. I said, this is going to come for us. I need you to give this presentation to our JTTF so they know what kind of resources are going to be required and how much labor-intensive work is going to be required to get through something like this. And I remember it clear as day. She looks at me and she hands me her business card and she says, Ron, call me on Monday and we'll hook it up. Well, Monday never came for us because that was the Thursday before the Pulse nightclub terrorist attack happened that very next Saturday night, Sunday morning. And about 2:25, 2:30 in the morning, my phone goes off with I know to be a text message. And it was from one of my JTTF agents. And it said, hey, boss, don't know if this is legit, but there's a hostage situation in Orlando and the guy is claiming to be ISIS. I said, get more information ASAP. Kind of very short, direct text. Well, I immediately call our CTOC because I want to see if there's anything going on that maybe hasn't hit the news waves yet. And I talked to the CTOC and I asked them, hey, anything going on in Orlando we should know about? And they said, no, boss, crickets, it's quiet. I said, okay, if something changes, please let me know. I just got this text message. Yeah. Still wasn't happy with that response, so I reached out to my acting supervisor at the time, who was Kevin Thuman, very squared away individual. And I said, hey, Kevin, do me a favor. Reach out to our GTTF body from Orlando PD and find out if there's something going on that we need to know about. And he said, got it, boss. Give me 2 seconds. Hangs up the phone. Well, I will tell you, I'm not a patient person. I literally waited about 20 seconds before I picked up the phone and I called John Mina, who I have a great working relationship with, both now and then. And what I wasn't prepared for was the way the phone call would go, right? I expected John to say, hey, Ron, what are you doing calling me at 2:30 in the morning on a Sunday? You owe me coffee, and hanging up on me, right, for waking him up. But what I got was something incredibly different. Literally, I remember just a long, thick, dark silence. And then John said, Ron, it's bad. There's over 20 dead. And my response was, I'm on my way. I got dressed in record time, threw on a suit. In fact, when they did the after action reports for the incident, the chief, the then sheriff, both said, we don't know how he got there in time. Literally, we turned around and looked over our shoulder and here was Ron. I would jokingly say the FBI Dodge Charger will do 130 miles an hour. What I was doing was, quite frankly, not just dispatching the entire Orlando resident agency, but I was getting the Tampa Division folks online in their command center so they could start working some of the logistics and doing some intel work while our folks were hitting the ground running on this. And talking to the folks that I had just met at the crisis response training at CERC, because they had said in that presentation, following Jill's presentation, if you need extra bodies, if you need extra evidence teams, if you need extra anything, call upon us. Well, quite frankly, I didn't really know a lot. I had a cryptic text and a verbal conversation with John that said how bad it was. I literally asked SERG to have HRT board a plane and start heading our direction because I didn't know what I had. And I figured I'd rather have the resources and not need them than need them and not have them. So when I arrived, to answer your question, John Mina, who was the chief at the time, he's now the sheriff, and Jerry Demings were standing out front of Pulse watching all of the controlled chaos, if you will, happening. So as I arrived, literally people were moving victims and casualties out of the warm zone. We were right in front of the covered patio area. Just inside there was the most and worst carnage of the event. And folks were literally, I say folks, law enforcement of all different agencies were pulling people out to safety and pulling people out to get them into pickup trucks, cars, anything that could get us just 2 blocks down the road to the level 1 trauma center, Orlando Regional Medical Center. So what most people don't know is that the Pulse nightclub was not his intended target that evening. He had actually gone down to Disney Springs and was going to target House of Blues. They were having Latino night there. And what we would come to find out later was that he showed up there with his significant firepower and was shocked to find 12 uniformed off-duty deputies working the security detail that night. And on video, we have him pacing back and forth, going into the gift shop, buying a shirt 3 sizes too small for himself, just as a way and a reason for him to be inside that area while he scoped it out, but constantly looking back over his shoulder to see where the deputies were at. And so he ascertained that he was not going to get the casualty count he was looking for, and he drove towards Orlando. He actually passed 2 other nightclubs because he couldn't find parking, and then happened upon the Pulse nightclub, where unfortunately there was parking very close to that covered patio and main entrance area, which is where he parked and then entered. He enters the club and does some pre-shooting surveillance for just minutes. And actually at one point, kind of to dispel the motivation theory that he was targeting a gay nightclub, an LGBTQ nightclub, he actually asked a security guard, hey, where are all the chicks at tonight? He had no clue that he was in an alternative lifestyle club. He then goes out, having not seen the off-duty deputy, or police officer rather, that was working there that night. Detective Grueller was actually just off the property dealing with an underage drinker. And so he had to remove that person from the property. And so he was not visible to the shooter. The shooter, thinking it was an extremely soft target, then goes to his minivan that he had rented, retrieved his weapons, and came in and began indiscriminately shooting everyone in the club.
What kind of weapons did he have?
So he had a Sig Sauer semi-automatic rifle that was a .223 round, and he also had a Glock 9mm. He dispensed 194 rounds in 3 minutes, and that was with each, individual trigger pull. It was not an automatic rifle.
Describe for us, like when he injured, you said he started shooting indiscriminately, kind of the layout, because I know that he went through various areas of the club and then, if I'm not mistaken, came back to make sure that he had sufficiently killed the people in some of those areas. So just kind of walk us through that.
So he comes in the main entrance and immediately button hooks to his right. So when you walk into the entrance, there was a cash register there and a small tabletop area where they were collecting entry fees. He immediately comes in and button hooks to the right and engages his first target point blank. And that puts him into the larger dance floor area by the covered patio. And again, begins indiscriminately shooting everyone in the club. And then he goes on this circuitous route where he walks to the back dance floor and bar area, which is smaller. And that's also where the rear of the building is and the restrooms. And then he comes back around where the entrance is, where you would normally pay to come in. And then he continues to do a circle from the front dance floor to the rear dance floor, coming through the lobby. And the unfortunate part is, this is, when I give this presentation, this is where I talk about run, hide, fight, right? We went around for years telling people run, hide, fight, but we were not really great about telling people run, hide, fight is not a sequence, right? It should be run if you can, hide if you can't, fight if you must. You may have to go right to fight. And what we would see in this particular instance is, and I'm definitely not Monday morning quarterbacking this, I share this, if it makes someone safe or it saves just one life, it bears saying. There were folks that were playing possum, pretending to be injured or dead, hoping he was just going to go away. And what we would find out from the survivors later was they thought that this was like a scorned lover, someone was there to exact a vendetta, that they were there for someone specific. He wasn't there for a mass casualty event. He was there for a specific target. And unfortunately, that was not the case. And at one point, the shooter does a magazine exchange that takes over 10 seconds with able-bodied victims at his feet, hoping he's going to go away. Now, again, I would never second guess what was going through their mind. But you have to wonder if 2 or 3 of them would have stood up and overtaken him at that point in time, could the outcome have been different? So it's very difficult to watch. And one of the things we know is that 75% or more of all active shooter situations are over and done in 5 minutes or less. Over half of those are done in 2 minutes or less. So it says a couple of things. One, you can't wait for the cavalry to arrive. You have to take matters into your own hands. And then two, I said earlier, there was 194 rounds discharged in just 3 minutes. So timing is everything, right? Time means everything in a situation like that.
Wow, that's just hard to believe. That many rounds, that amount of time, and the victims. And I know that when you showed up, we talked about the fact that he was still there. And I also know that individuals were hiding, like in the restrooms and things like that. So kind of after he's made his rounds, he's changed his magazine. What does he do at that point?
So after he does the magazine exchange, he continues to shoot people that are laying there on the ground, both deceased and, playing possum. And then the first responders, well, let me back up. You still had Detective Grueller outside, who was dealing with that underage drinker. As soon as he hears those rounds going off, he knows what's happening. He moves to a position where he can see into the rear dance floor, and that's where the report of the gunfire is coming from. He sees the shooter and immediately engages him, sending rounds downrange. Unfortunately, our investigation would reveal that the shooter probably never even knew he was there because of the sound and the lights and the report of his own gunfire. He then continues to the front again in that circuitous route that I was mentioning. So Detective Grueller then moves around to the front of the building, which is where the covered patio is, again sees the shooter through the doors and engages him yet again, unfortunately not striking him. And again, we don't think the shooter even knew he was there at that time. And as other backup deputies and officers arrive, a team goes to the front entrance, which you have one entry into that lobby and then a very large pane glass window. A team assembles there while another team assembles at the covered patio area, and they're going to make entry. And this is a phenomenal tactical judgment and move, in my opinion. And it's no surprise that the lieutenant that led the charge into that lobby area that night is a former SWAT operator. But they decide, instead of walking through the main front door and potentially walking through a fatal funnel, they shatter the glass pane window and they enter that window and they fan out in all directions, covering all danger zones. And then they start to move into the club simultaneously. And as they get back to the rear dance floor area, there's this very narrow 3-ish foot hallway that leads to the bathrooms. And they believe that they've driven him back into the bathroom. Not completely sure which one he's in, they suspect, but they're not sure. And they start immediately giving commands. Someone posts up on the corner of the bar, aimed down the hallway, and giving commands for them to surrender, to come out. It's important to note at that point in time, no gunshots are heard. So it literally went from an active shooter situation to a barricaded subject. While they're holding him there, calling him out, trying to make contact, people are being evacuated from the warm zone. Literally across the street where we had the casualty collection point, which was a cinder block building, an Einstein Bagels establishment, where we were able to figure out who's going to go right to the level 1 trauma center, who's going to go to other hospitals to avoid overloading the level 1 trauma center.
So how long did this last before the actual disruption of the shooter phone?
So we enacted the hostage rescue effort about 5:15. So this is about 3 a.m. So 2.5 hours, between 2.5 and 3 hours, start to finish. As the negotiators from Orlando Police Department are talking to the shooter, we find out that there is hostages on the other side of the women's room in a dressing room, and we know this because there was somebody on scene, a security guard that was on the phone with somebody, and we're trying to get some information from all the security guards, like, hey, give us a layout. We might have to assault the establishment. We want to draw a schematic. He found out he was talking to a potential hostage inside the dressing room, and this individual told us, hey, I can hear you guys talking to the shooter on the other side of the wall. I'm in here with 7 other people. So we said, we got a plan, but you're not going to like it. We want you to push the air conditioning unit out of the window very carefully, and we're going to catch it. And then we want you to lift the 7 other people inside that dressing room to safety, and we need you to be last to make sure we get all 8 of you out. And to his credit, he said, I'm your guy. And so we pushed that AC unit in. They caught it, kept it quiet, and we were able to rescue 8 people while engaging the shooter with the hostage negotiators in the very next room. Now, the other thing I would add is you're talking about paper-thin drywall. This individual has a 6-hour 223 long gun. At any moment, he could have fired through the walls, both at the officers that were holding cover on the hallway, or the hostages in the room adjacent. So a tremendous act of heroism on the hostages' part, as well as the officers that helped pull them to safety.
Very amazing strategic rescue of those people. And then you mentioned that the shooter was on the phone. Was he? Well, what did he tell people about why he was doing what he was doing?
So he actually claimed allegiance to ISIS. He claimed allegiance to Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi. He was saying things like he was doing this, wanting the United States to stop the bombings in Iraq and Syria, saying all the things you would expect a terrorist to say. We would come to find out later through investigation that this was not foreign directed. He was a lone wolf that was self-radicalized. And quite honestly, per his father's comments, it probably never opened a Quran a day in his life. This was an individual that was looking to lash out, and this was going to be his excuse. But he was on the phone both with 911 operators. He was on the phone with his wife, which we would later find out. Incidentally, on my way to the scene, I had dispatched a supervisor and an analyst to go to the 911 call center to find out anything we could on who the hostage taker was. And they had found out that through reverse 911 lookup of the phone number, who the individual was. And lo and behold, the Bureau had dealt with this individual twice before, once 3 years earlier and once 2 years earlier. And so when we got in the command post, I immediately shared that information with John, Jerry, and Danny, the chief, the sheriff, and the SAC for the Florida Department of Law Enforcement. So the collaboration was seamless. And what I told them was, hey, we know who the shooter is, or we think we know who the shooter is. We don't have an active investigation. Here's what I know about him. And we were able to incorporate that into our decision making. Mind you, I had already asked HRT to board a plane and start heading to us. I had already asked the Tampa Division SWAT team to assemble and start responding to the location. But there came a point in time where he stopped answering the phone, or he would hang up on us and not call us back. And John looked at me and said, hey, Ron, I know HRT is on the way, but we got to go. Like, we've got everybody out of the warm zone. We can get out. He's not answering. We got to move. And my response to him was, absolutely, we've got to move. And that's when we initiated the hostage rescue effort about 5:15 a.m.
And then the hostages that you rescued, how then did you move forward actually disrupting him?
So there was a total of 30 hostages in the building once we started the negotiations, notwithstanding all the people we were moving out of the warm zone. You had the men's room, the women's room where he was located, you had the dressing room, and then there was another room over by like the DJ booth. So a total of 30 were actually rescued as a result of that hostage rescue effort. So what we decided was that 3-foot hallway going down to the bathrooms led to 2 opposing doors. One of the biggest nightmares, if you've ever been in a tactical situation like that, every SWAT operator that looked at that said, there's no way you want to go down and face 2 opposing doors, not being exactly certain whether there was one shooter or more, or which room the shooter was in. So the decision was made to do a tactical explosive breach on the exterior wall. And the hope was that we would do it in the men's room, and then essentially hold to our right, fight to our left, which meant we would clear that restroom and then walk across into the next bathroom if we hadn't already engaged him, and engage him there. It would be a head-on fight. I often joke, I said, as Hopper Luck would have it, which is worse than Murphy's Law, when we did the explosive breach, we blew a hole smack dab in the middle of that 3-foot hallway. We did not want to come down from the opposite end. And to add insult to injury, there was a solid core poured beam with rebar reinforcing it, running right through where we initiated the blast. So a breacher starts trying to make that hole bigger. So now you've got the women's restroom to our left, the men's restroom to our right. The Bearcat driver backs up and starts punching holes in the wall of the men's restroom. And immediately hostages start come running out, I believe to the tune of 18 or so. And they all start saying the same thing. He's got explosives. He's going to blow the place sky high. He's still in there. And so as we're punching holes in the wall with the Bearcat and the SWAT team is moving up, rounds start coming from the women's restroom. The Bearcat driver moves left and starts punching holes in the wall of the women's restroom, and that's when he presents himself in the hallway. And he puts 1 foot up on the exposed area of the cinder blocks where we had punched the hole, and he starts shooting at the SWAT team. And then there's a firefight. The SWAT team engages with him. Ultimately, Officer Napolitano with the Orlando Police Department takes a round to the helmet, right to the forehead. To his credit, he's shooting rounds down range. One of his battle buddies pulls him off to check him. He shrugs him off and does a magazine exchange and gets back in the gunfight. Thank God we would find out he was only hit with a handgun round, because he came out with a handgun and a long gun in his other hand. SWAT team ultimately shoots him, knocks him down. He falls on his back. And at that point, things go quiet, silent. Bad guy down, on his back. As the SWAT team moves up on the explosive breach, they see a box on his chest with wires sticking out of it. Now, again, remind you that he's already been threatening that there were explosives in and around the perimeter. But as we move up on the shooter, we would come to find out that it was a emergency lighting box that had fallen squarely on his chest from the hallway that gave the appearance of a bomb, but in fact, no explosive devices were found after secondary and tertiary clears of the premises. What I will tell you is, as a result of the tremendous carnage and the damage we did breaking through the walls, both with the explosive breach and the Bearcat, there was a large amount of blood mixed with water, and it created like a gelatin muck throughout the entire club, about 2 inches thick. And just the incessant ringing of cell phones gurgling under that bloody mix was very, very traumatic for the team, as was the victims, obviously, to go through that crime scene. So the subject died at the scene, and we immediately were in search of any co-conspirators, obviously, right? So one of the things we did was we dispatched local law enforcement along with the Fort Pierce RA down in Miami Division to go make contact with the wife, who was, to say the least, less than forthcoming, right? And our investigation would reveal several things that were very concerning, and we ultimately wound up charging her with providing material support as well as obstruction of justice. Couple of things that, and these are all made public in the jury trial. We found that weeks leading up to the shooting, he had awoken his wife and the 3-year-old son at the time and took them down to an open air mall area, like a nightclub and restaurant area in the Miami division area and around Fort Pierce, and asked her at around 3 a.m., what do you think would be a better target, Disney or a nightclub? She failed to tell anybody that he had asked her that question. She knew that he was, accumulating some weapons, that he was consuming rhetoric and beheading videos online. Couple of weeks prior to the shooting, she had never had a driver's license before in her life, but yet she goes to get her driver's license. She fails, goes back the next week, and finally gets it. She had never been on their bank account leading up to the shooting, but yet a week or two before, she's added as the sole beneficiary to the bank account. He held a job as a security officer, security guard, largely because he tried to become a police officer and was turned down because of his psychological exam. He was never able to become a police officer. They spend twice his annual salary in one shopping spree weeks before the shooting, buying things like laptops, iPads, jewelry. To any half-witted detective, these are things that can be sold or hawked or pawned at a later time for money, right? It's one way to stockpile money that you don't have, right? And so all of this was presented to the jury, including the fact that she eventually admitted that when he came home from work that day, he literally put on a shirt over his pants and said, "Do I look Latino to you?" It was Latino night down at House of Blues. She then watched him stockpile weapons into a duffel bag, and she said, in her own admission, she began crying, asking him, begging him not to go. She knew what he was about to do. Maybe she didn't know where, but she knew what he was about to do. And then at one point she says, well, if anyone calls looking for you, I'm going to tell them that you're with your friend Nemo. She's setting up an alibi for him. She also denied being in contact with him while he was in the restroom, when we know that he did contact her. She deleted some things off of Facebook and off of her computer, her iPad before we got there. But, unfortunately, a jury found her not guilty. Wrong call, in my opinion, but we live and die by our justice system, and the jury has spoken. So that is what it is. But I will tell you that members of the jury have said since they just could not find it in their hearts to convict this woman who may or may not have known what was going to happen or what happened.
So you referenced this earlier, his motivation. So you mentioned he was not a religious person growing up. He was not, educated on the Quran. So this is not a religious ideology that he has. This has nothing to do with the religion of Islam. What did you learn about when his radicalization process began? You mentioned it was ISIS, and how that process happened.
Yeah, so that's a fantastic question. So as I mentioned, this individual was known to the FBI twice before. The first time was 3 years earlier, where FBI Miami got a call that someone was claiming or was making threats to his coworkers, and that he was a member of both ISIS and Hezbollah, right? So any well-trained JTTF agent that gets that call immediately is less concerned, right? Because the analogy I like to give is, if you say you are a member of both ISIS and Hezbollah, that is the same thing as saying you're both Catholic and Jewish at the same time. Completely different beliefs, right?
Stop you there, because I want to focus on this point, because a lot of people may not understand that the ideology that Hezbollah, bases their extremism on is the Shia sect of Islam, which is different.
Correct.
And so, not to get into a religious discussion here, but historically, when we were working counterterrorism, you did it, I did it for years, exactly that. You didn't really see overlapping blend of ideologies. that I believe has changed somewhat, and we can probably get onto that just because of the way social media is, and you know, the individuals that now kind of they just follow extremist rhetoric and they don't understand the difference between the groups. But back then, you're absolutely right. As an FBI seasoned counterterrorism agent, if I get a report in that says exactly that, he's Hezbollah and ISIS, I'm like, well, that's not correct.
Right, exactly right. So you immediately, your level of concern diminishes a little bit, but still, they go out and they interview him. And he says, yeah, I said it. I said it because they're bullying me. I want them to stop. He says, I don't even own a gun, which at the time, other than, working for the security company, he didn't. And I will tell you, both then and now, there's not a prosecutor in the state or federal system that if you bring them a confession that says, yeah, I didn't mean it, I didn't have the means to do it, I just wanted them to stop bullying me, there's nothing you're going to prosecute there, right? So they close it out. The next incident happens when about a year later, the first American suicide bomber overseas happens, and they find out that that individual attended a mosque in the Miami division, and so did the shooter. So doing due diligence proactively, they go out and they interview him. And they come to find out that while they both attended the mosque, they didn't attend it at the same times, and they were not associated. They did not know each other. What we used to go around telling people was the phrase, see something, say something. And when this happened here in Orlando, I stopped saying that. I actually take it a step further. What I tell folks is, if you see something and you say something actionable, we will do something. On one of the very first press conferences I did, trying to seek more information on the shooter, I appealed to the public and said, has anybody seen this individual? Please contact us. And an owner of a gun shop down in Miami division says, aha, I know that guy, and I told the FBI about that guy, and they did nothing about him. And my response publicly was, you're right, we did absolutely nothing. Because let me tell you how it went. Gun shop calls the Miami division and says, hey, I just had a suspicious Middle Eastern male come into my gun shop, and he wanted to buy 1,000 rounds of ammunition and a bulletproof vest. And the FBI says, okay, we're on our way. They show up. All right, tell us what you got. He says, well, I told you on the phone. Suspicious Middle Eastern male wanted to buy 1,000 rounds of ammunition and a bulletproof vest. Okay, what happened? Well, I told him no. We told him to leave. Okay, did you sell him anything? Do you have a credit card receipt? Do you have a driver's license? No. These cameras you have in this facility, do they work? Yes. Do they record? No. Okay. Did you see what he was driving? Did you have a tag number, a partial tag number? No. So what do you have? You have a suspicious Middle Eastern male that came in and tried to buy 1,000 rounds of ammunition. What I would submit to you is things may have been different had they said, hey, this individual who matches the other two reports in our holding, could we have opened a full investigation of that individual? I would submit to you, if I was the supervisor, the answer would be yes. But we did not know that's who he was because you did not give us any information that was actionable. When we went back and dug into his social media exploits, communications, what we would find out is he did not radicalize to that extent until about 2 months prior to the shooting. So even if they would have investigated him 3 years prior and 2 years prior, he would not have had that level of engagement with the violent rhetoric that he had those 2 months leading up to the attack. So that's very important information to take away from this particular incident.
Yeah, that's very interesting. And so 2 months, if that's when, the real radicalization began, that's a pretty quick, what we used to call the flash to bang, right?
Yep.
And so how was he, what, was he on social media platforms? Was he consuming ISIS propaganda? You mentioned Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi. What was he consuming to kind of feed his, and I don't want the words around, but I know oftentimes these individuals who radicalize, they have a desire to commit violent acts before and then adopt ideologies that would legitimize that desire to be violent. Did you find that in this case?
Yeah, that's exactly what happened here. So I think he was looking to lash out. He wasn't accepted. He failed to become a police officer multiple times. He just felt less than, right? And so this was going to be his way to lash out. You know, all of those things he consumed, YouTube, on the different platforms. He was working out to beheading videos. I mean, this is a sick individual. You know, a statement that I've said ever since this command post was, a command post in a crisis situation is not the time to be handing out your business card, right? The fact that John, Jerry, myself, Danny could get into that environment and start making decisions collaboratively but unilaterally, you cannot put a price on that.
I feel like the threat landscape has not gotten any better, and in fact is much worse. Here we are in 2026, coming up on the 10-year anniversary of this attack, and that collaboration is more important than ever because, from what I see from the private sector, even you do have now that blending of ideologies, which again is even more scary because you don't have the typical, indicators, right?
Right.
And a lot of times we're seeing, again, in youth, like the juveniles, right, where there's that desire to act out violence to make them feel better, and then grabbing hold of an ideology that says that if you do that, you're going to be a hero. And I feel like that's the same ideology that led to this attack that we're seeing just rampantly being disseminated across all social media platforms.
Yeah, it's terrible, and I agree with you. I don't think it's getting any better. I think it's getting worse. And mental health is a large part of it. We really have to focus, especially on youth. We're seeing it in schools. We're seeing it. It's not just youth. I mean, we're seeing it across the board. So it's something we definitely have to watch out for.
Well, thank you so much for taking the time on this.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me on.